Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Dream Chasers Ground Zero. Today, I have with us, as always, recently, our fabulous co host, April Munson. And here we are today, I guess you could say, wrapping up, no pun intended, our special edition December series that we've had going on. And what we're going to do today is pretty much the opposite of what we've done the last couple of weeks. And we're going to have, me back in the host figurative driver's seat doing it in a more in-depth interview of April's take of everything that's happened over the last year, everywhere from her personal ground zero moment to, what she's learned along the way and even where we're at now. So before we go ahead and dive into that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to her and just let her, share any opening remarks she might have, and then we'll go ahead and dive into it.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to do this. I don't really feel like I get to tell my story often, and I always feel like that there's value to it. I just feel like sometimes you just don't even know where to begin to share your story. So thank you for being open to this idea of you and I both kind of bouncing back and forth and sharing our ground zero moment, and just kind of like life story on this platform. So I'm really happy to be able to do this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and even just before we started recording here, we talked about how, you really haven't had that huge opportunity to put it completely out in the open, your personal story, like in depth, like truly sharing your journey as to how you got from point A to point B. And I think that's going to be really important. So with that, why don't you go ahead and share that ground zero moment with us?
Okay. So I'm going to ask, is the ground zero moment I'm sharing from like the most recent couple years, or like how far back would you like me to go?
I mean, you can even do both. I mean, obviously, we've had different guests on here that have had more than one ground zero. I mean, I have had more than one ground zero. I think we all have. So,
Okay.
I mean, wherever it is that you feel you want to share the most value today. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
So we're going to take it back to 2010 because that's when I graduated high school. And I'll say that in high school, I was always the 4.0 student who was in every club, every organization. I had to have my name everywhere. And in that time, you have a lot of high school teachers that are telling you, you have to go to college, you have to go, you have to figure out what you want to do. Because if you don't go now, it's going to be so hard to go back. And I think at that time, I was just so busy in all of my clubs and organizations and musicals and sports and the whole thing that I hadn't even thought about long-term careers and futures. Like I've always dreamt really big, but I had no idea what that looked like. And among all of that, I really had no support. I didn't have a mom who was invested in me. I didn't have a dad who was invested in me. Like my mom and I never really got along. And I truly think that's because I had more opportunities than she did. And I think she was really jealous of that. And as I got older, we just had no relationship. And my dad chose alcohol over everything. So it was kind of just me on my own. And my teachers at school saw that and they really took like a parental arm to me and kept me involved in things, and that really did a lot of good for me academically. So when it came time to graduate and there's no more practice and there's no more, anywhere you have to be, my world stopped because I didn't know what to do. It's like I don't have to be anywhere, I don't have to do anything other than go to work. But what is this new life? What is this? I didn't have any college tours, nothing. So I had a girlfriend who was a couple years older than me who graduated and went to Westminster college about 20 minutes away from home. And I thought, I want to be just like her. I see the pictures of what she gets to do. It looks like a lot of fun. I'm going to apply, do the same thing. So I had applied, and this was before I graduated, got in, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go to Westminster. But in that summer of graduating before school started, I really had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't even thought about what my major was going to be. So when I finally got to Westminster, I had like a full mental breakdown. I had no car. I felt, even though I was only 20 minutes away from home, I I felt like I was on another planet. I didn't know anyone. I had really nothing. And I didn't even last a whole month at Westminster before um I ended up withdrawing. I had a really bad weekend. My father, who I had mentioned, who's a heavy alcoholic, had picked me up from school, brought me back. The alcohol was too much for him and took it out on me. And I was just like, I can't do this. Nothing in my world makes sense. How could I possibly think about a career when I don't even know what my home is going to look like? I really I had no idea what I was doing. Completely lost, with absolutely no support. There wasn't any siblings. There was nothing. It was just me. So after making the choice to withdraw, I ended up jumping into the workforce and getting an apartment and just kind of rolling with it for the next 7 years. And I would say, looking back now, I don't think it's a waste of time. All those 7 years that I was just working and coming home and working and coming home and switching jobs and moving and doing whatever I needed to do, because I got a lot of life experience. But in the moment, I really had no idea, like I said, what I was doing, and everything felt like it meant nothing. I really thought, is this all my life is going to be, going from the star student to college dropout to just working at my local McDonald's and Quaker Steak and Lube to keep an apartment roof over my head just to go back to work again tomorrow. My friends are at college, they're in relationships, they're moving, they're gone. Like, what is this life? What am I supposed to be doing here? It was probably a ground zero decade compared to a ground zero moment of having to just, how Aaron, you and I have talked about sitting in your silence and trying to make sense of it. And people always say that you have to get out of your comfort zone. I think I had no choice but to live outside of my comfort zone. And it forced me to make new decisions and try new things, which were obviously so uncomfortable for me, but you had to make them work. And then looking back now, I can see that I actually gained so much value, but you'd never realize it in the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And I really love that you put a lot of emphasis there on the end of getting out of your comfort zone. And sometimes, in order to do that, you have to intentionally put yourself in a situation that you're going to be uncomfortable. I mean, and I can definitely relate to, making that college transition from, being a good student in high school and then going to a college where you don't know anyone. Like nobody else from my high school went to the college that I chose to go to. So I totally understand that kind of, you're going to a place where there's a lot of collective people kind of going for the same common goal, but you still feel completely alone. And that's, in itself is something that you have to learn and adapt to. And like you said, like that wasn't for you at that time. And that's okay. Like that's all part of the journey. And that helped you, take that time to learn what you needed to learn. And like, I'm somebody that, it doesn't really matter to me, like how you get there. And that's one of the really great things that I love about Ground Zero is that, however much time it takes, however many tries it takes, it's not that important. What matters to me is that you didn't give up. And that's one of the most important things that I like about your story. And that's where I really want to shift kind of into the next part that, yeah, you took, what you call a ground zero decade, but you took, that time to yourself. And, yeah, maybe at that time you were just working and coming home, but you realized that's not what you wanted for the rest of your life. And then you made a decision based off of that. And I want to kick it back over to you to tell that story rather than myself. But you made a decision at the time, after taking all of that time away from school and, you learned what life is about. And in doing that, you had to make a decision, regarding what you wanted the rest of your life to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to you and let you share on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. In that time of working, switching jobs, trying to, buy a car on my own, buying junker after junker after junker, walking to work, finding rides, the whole thing, I thought, oh my gosh, I am never going to get out of this loop unless I get my education. And how am I going to do that? And I was terrified of going back to Westminster. And at the same time, that was all I wanted. So I was terrified because the weekend that I had whenever I dropped out, I had actually bought a bunch of pills, and I remember crying over sink because I was miserable. My mom had kicked me out before I graduated. I had no family at my graduation. I'm stuck living with a man who I didn't feel comfortable with at all, but is supposed to be my father, who is, treating me horribly as a result of his alcoholism. And I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. Like there's nothing here left for me. And like my world doesn't make sense. So I took all of the pills and ended up in the hospital, and the school found out, and it was a whole thing. And they had told me that I would have to go through all this counseling to be able to come back to school. And I didn't want to face anybody. I didn't want to be that girl with, the drug problem. And I had never touched a drug a day in my life. And I didn't want to face that. I didn't want to be that person. So I avoided it. And I looked at other local colleges. I looked at Grove City. I looked at Slippery Rock. I looked at YSU. I tried everything to get around Westminster. And somehow it never worked. No matter what I tried to do, there was just always something in the way of me being able to move forward with those other schools. And I think, looking back now, of course that happened for a reason. And I finally, this was probably like 5 or 6 years later, I was like, you know what? I see now how it didn't work out these other schools. Maybe I just need to drive back up to Westminster, have a conversation with someone in the registrar and ask them what I need to do to come back. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, how am I going to be able to afford to take time off of work to be able to make time to go to school? Because as a single individual, it's hard to pay rent and a car payment and all of your utilities and everything on your own. Like I was working days, I was working midnights, I was coming home, sleeping for 2 hours and switching clothes and going back out to work. So I was really kind of distraught with the possibility of what that looked like, but I wasn't really sure if there were part-time opportunities and so forth. So I drove back up to the school. I can't tell you how many promissory notes I signed saying that I was going to pay off what I owed to go back to Westminster, that, I just year after year was not able to pay because I had car issues or whatever. So I really at that point just thought, oh my God, I am never going to make it back to school, but I know that I have to do something. I don't want to be a server for the rest of my life. So we could jump a little bit forward, and it was the spring of 2016. And I was like, you know what? I am finally in a position where I think I can financially pay off my bill this summer, and I'm going to go back to school this fall. Just kidding. We were pregnant. Found out I was having a baby, and baby would be due in November. And I thought, oh my God, okay, maybe I am just not meant to be able to go to school. I have tried everything. I've tried to balance my life, take responsibility for everything, do it without family, do it without help, cold snow, walking, car, this, that, every single thing that came, in my way. Finally had a great relationship, found out we were pregnant, and I was like, all right, maybe my purpose in life is to just give my baby a better life than what I had. And right, isn't that what we always want for our kids? We want to give our kids a better life. And I thought maybe it's going to be my purpose to be able to give my kid what I didn't have, that support, that love, get them involved in activities and so on and so forth. So that was my perspective, and I was learning to accept that. And I was like, this is all going to be fine. And if I don't go to school because of this, and I'm a mother instead, then that is okay. So a couple months, well, not a couple months, 9 months goes by, we have baby. And at the time I was working midnight shifts at Planet Fitness. So I was working midnights, coming home, I was with baby all day, and I would do the same thing night after night. And I thought, you know what, this is easy now because I'm at work, baby's at home, I don't have to get up with him in the middle of the night, dad's got that taken care of, like I'm good. But it's not gonna be like this forever. And I started thinking, I don't want to be that mom that's like, sorry, honey, I can't help you with your homework because I have to go work my midnight job at the gym. Or sorry, honey, I can't be here to hang out with the sleepovers with you and your friends, or I can't make the game, or I can't, whatever it is. And that really ate at me. And I knew that was years and years away. I mean, baby was only a couple months old. I think he was 6 or 7 months old at this time. And I'm, it's finally hitting me. I'm out of the, hustle and bustle of learning a new baby. And I'm thinking about all of this stuff. And I was like, I can't wait a second longer. I do not want to be that mom. Like, I didn't have that support. I cannot be this person. So as someone who likes face-to-face, that next morning, as soon as I got home from work, I put him in the car. I drove straight to Westminster. I walked in, I sat down. I didn't care who still worked there, who recognized me, if they did or if they didn't. And I said, listen, I know I owe some money. I know that there is conversation of help out there for single moms, because we were not married, still not married, anytime now. And I was like, is it possible for me to ever be able to come back? And sure enough, Cheryl Gerber in the registrar was like, April, it is absolutely possible. And I could sit here and say, like, I feel like I cried. I even just talking about it, it filled my soul knowing that there was a possibility, there was an opportunity. Somebody was going to be there to help me. I was working with the person directly who was going to be able to put me in the spot that I needed to be in. And from there on, she was like, these are the steps. This is what you need to do. Like this, you need to get daycare. You need to apply for assistance. We're going to get your scholarships. Da, 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 da. I did everything she told me that I needed to do. I had to reapply to come back after being gone for the last 7 years because of my withdrawal. And that fall I was back in. And it was, people say that like, oh, my baby changed my life. And you maybe never get to know the end of that story. Like you're like, okay, how did your kid change your life? What is it? For me, yeah, my life began and completely changed after I had Raylan. Had it not been for him, I probably would have just settled for doing what I was doing because it was, it worked for me. But I could not feel good and whole for myself just being that way. I had to be more. And it fueled my heart, like you and I've said, it set my soul on fire. And I was absolutely determined to be able to come back, and everything lined up the way that, it did, in the right way, in the right time, I believe. And yeah, I graduated this May with 2 babies.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's just a heck of a journey, like, I mean, I look back on it and I have heard it before, but even like you said, when I told mine, like every time you kind of get something new, and it's just amazing that like you didn't know what was going to happen around every corner. You didn't know that there was going to be a solution, but you had to kind of just take your faith, throw it over your shoulder and say, you know what, I'm going to put myself in a position to make something happen for myself, to recognize opportunity and to kind of seize this moment per se. But I mean, it's just truly amazing that, like a lot of people would have just given up. And they just said, you know what, no, I don't want to go back. Like it's too much work. I already have kids. I'm not doing that, but you didn't. And I think that's really important as to where, as to how far you've come now. And that's definitely something that I want to dig into here moving forward. But for right now, I think it's good enough that we kind of, I guess you could say, close out this first part of our 2-part segment of yours, just kind of leaving it as far as like, this is where I was. This was my ground zero moment here, and this is what I had to go through. But now, when we come back, we're going to go ahead and tell everybody about what you learned as you went back through school and where that's led you to now. Some of the different opportunities that have come, some of the different things that you've kind of had to recognize since all of those other things, and kind of shift you into a whole new light, I guess you could say. So, before we go ahead and do that, do you kind of have any closing remarks going into, the next part of our series?
I don't know. Like, I feel great being able to share that. And it's nice to hear positive feedback, especially for, going through it alone. You never think about in those moments what it would be like to talk about a couple years later. And you never think about when you're feeling as low as you are in those moments, like, oh, I'm going to have this big success story, because after 7 years of the same thing, I never thought I was going to be a success story. That wasn't even anything I was worried about. I just wanted to, you know, have more for myself. And that was even before having a baby. So, you know, I would love to be a light and a resource for anyone out there who is pregnant or is thinking about having a baby, or who just needs support for going back to school at any point. Yeah, that's really what I want people to get out of this, is that you can do it. It's all about your mindset. And if anyone needs help, I'm more than happy to talk about whatever that looks like for them.
100%. And we're definitely going to put links in the show notes for that. So if anybody does want to reach out to her, that will be available. And we will also dive more into that in the next part of our series here. But with that, everybody, for now, this is Dream Chasers Ground Zero, and there's nowhere to go from here. But thanks, guys.